Hello, everyone. Can you all see and hear me? Yes, very good. Excellent. So today we're going to start the chapter on theories of justification, chapter three. But before that, we have to finish off our discussion of knowledge. So we got to talk about reliabilism. That's about where we left off last time, if memory serves. If my slides usually remember where I was, I think I had covered the idea of misleading defeaters, right? We were talking about the example with the MMR vaccine, et cetera. That leads us on to reliabilism. Um, anybody following? I know I've asked this before, but anybody been following the news? Any news that might be pertinent to our talk of misleading defeaters previously, specifically the example that I was using, that Crumley was using? Yeah, Tylenol. New misleading defeater just dropped. So for those who aren't really in the know, RFK Jr. and Donald Trump and all of those folks uh, in the American administration made an announcement last night where they linked taking Tylenol during pregnancy to risks of autism and other neurodevelopmental conditions. Now, I'm not a medical doctor, but from what I can glean from expert opinion is that, Tylenol is still the safest and effective thing that we've got. If a pregnant person is experiencing, say, a very, very high fever or severe pain. Um, the interesting thing about this is that the FDA is actually going to change the directions um, for taking Tylenol for people in this situation. Now, that could potentially be another misleading defeater, right? If you are, say, not in contact with a medical expert, um, and you're taking this on the authority, say the President of the United States' authority, and not a medical professional's authority, that could certainly be a misleading defeater if you believe that Tylenol is safe for people to use while they're pregnant, right? So that's another example. You want to keep your eyes out for misleading defeaters of all kinds. It's good. Remember this links back to our talk about fallibilism. Um, a fallibilist would say that, we can have knowledge even if it's possible that we're wrong. So we can have knowledge even if there are defeaters out there, but we need to be careful of the misleading defeaters. So question about the quiz. How long a short answer considered? I think I've spelled that out in the instructions. Um, 1 to 2 paragraphs. And you want them to be substantive paragraphs, not just like 2 or 3 sentences and then start a new paragraph and then give me another 2 or 3 sentences. Give me a substantive answer. Give me as much correct information as you can for the short answer questions. Does that make sense? Okay, it does say once you open that section and you begin that section, it will specify that. I guess I didn't specify that um, on the instructions, on the overall instructions, but that's what you can expect. I'd say no, there's no word count, but just one or two nice paragraphs with as much correct information as you can give me. And speaking of the quiz, I hope you all saw my announcement. I don't think you should actually begin until we're done with this lecture because there's some stuff here that might be on the quiz, right? So it's open now, but you're good to begin after today's lecture, and then you have until 11:59 p.m. on Friday, this Friday, to complete it. So let's talk about reliabilism. This is a sort of trend in epistemology that arose in the 1970s. Alvin Goldman is one of the more well-known advocates of reliabilism. David Armstrong is another. We're going to talk about both of their ideas briefly here. So on reliabilism, connection to the truth, which remember is always what is the case out in the world, that's the primary justification or the primary element of justification when it comes to making sure that our true beliefs count as knowledge. Um, so reliabilism emphasizes reliable connections between our beliefs and the truth, or our beliefs and the way the world is. Um, Goldman, for his part, focuses on reliable belief forming processes. These are cognitive processes or psychological processes. So it's generally a reliable belief forming process or part of a reliable belief forming process for me to use my senses. So, absent any sort of sensory deficit or um, maybe some kind of cognitive impairment, like I'm awake, I'm normally alert, I'm not hallucinating. Um, I can use my senses to look over here and determine that there's a coffee cup on the table. That's what we would call maybe like a perceptual belief. So a belief formed on the basis of perception. So I perceive the coffee cup there on the table. I believe that there is a coffee cup on the table. It's probably true that there's a coffee cup there. I mean, I don't think I'm in the matrix right now. And it's the reliability of that belief forming process that serves as justification for me holding that true belief. Um, David Armstrong focuses on reliable connections between beliefs and the environment. So uh, maybe the emphasis is less on what processes specifically are involved. Rather, it's on just that there is a reliable connection between your belief and your environment. Um, there could be a reliable connection, for example, between your beliefs about epistemology and what epistemologists actually do, such as your philosophy professor's testimony, right? That's not exactly a cognitive or I mean, cognitive psychological processes are involved in listening to what I'm saying, understanding it, forming your own beliefs, etc. But here, yeah, my testimony is like a reliable connection between your beliefs about epistemology and what epistemologists are doing. Whether you're focused more on reliable connections or reliable belief forming process, the idea is that your justified true beliefs come about in a way where they're more or most likely to be true. We've got a question here, or more of a comment. On reliabilism in the Tylenol study, the authors of the study specifically state that their study demonstrated at most a relationship existing between the variables and said there was no way to infer causation. That's right. It could be the case that pre-existing conditions, etc. Yeah, yeah. It should not be interpreted the way the president. I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Um, the problem is, I worry, and I'm not alone in this, that a lot of people don't read any deeper than the president's comments, right? I mean, after I saw this announcement, I started, surfing through the news. Um, and of course, I was watching the CBC, right, and they're pretty good at getting good expert testimony, from family doctors, from obstetricians, from pediatricians, etc. Um, I don't have high hopes. Oh, as it relates to reliable. Oh, yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, listening to President Trump is probably not reliable. Yeah, probably not a reliable means of forming beliefs. Yeah, that's true. And the reason I worry so much is just because of the whole bleach injection thing during COVID, right? Calls to poison control centers went up after Donald Trump went on the air. and sort of speculated that maybe with some kind of chemical, people could eradicate the coronavirus. Um, so yes, absolutely right that this is not a reliable means of forming belief. But I think my early, but yeah, that's a good observation. Really, this was about the idea of defeaters. But yeah, I think a reliabilist would say what you need to do is rely on the testimony from the right kind of expert and not from like a political authority. Um, well, you could make, yeah, Khalid, you could make an argument that that's a reliable belief forming process. The individual's best judgment based on how credible the experts that they're listening to is. You could make that argument, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these are all great points. I just don't want to lose sight of the main issue, right? Which is about defeaters, and again, as one of you pointed out, you can make a connection with reliabilism here too. Um, just to get back on track, so we can finish this, um, we can formalize this notion of reliabilism as Crumley does here. We need our belief to be the result of a reliable process. So, as you were saying, maybe if you now believe that Tylenol is too dangerous, if you're pregnant, that seems to not satisfy number one, right? If you believe that on the basis of the testimony of Donald Trump, I mean, he can't even pronounce acetaminophen. Um, like, go watch the clip. He struggles to pronounce acetaminophen. Um, there must be no alternatives that could lead S to have a false belief. Again, if you were to take it on the president's testimony, I mean that itself is a testimony that could lead you to have a false belief. And the belief must be true. So it looks like if we're just taking medical advice from the president of the United States, we don't satisfy any of these conditions. I think there are lots of conditions, or lots of cases where we can satisfy these conditions, though. For example, listening to the beliefs you form about epistemology or some other branch of philosophy on the basis of your professor's testimony. And your professor is an expert, right? So if you believe reliabilism is a movement in epistemology that arose in the 1970s, well, if you believe that because I told you, or because you read it in Crumley's textbook, that's a reliable process. There don't seem to be any alternatives that could lead you to have a false belief. I don't have somebody coming over and saying, "Hey, Professor Redstone is wrong. Reliabilism didn't arise in the 70s. It arose in the 40s or something." Well, that's not happening, and your belief has to be true. Um, we could probably come up with some other examples, but I'd rather move on. Now, one problem with reliabilism, and this is pointed out by Lawrence Bonjour, he says reliabilism can count cases of irrational belief as justified, and irrational beliefs shouldn't count as knowledge. And the example he uses is really interesting. He comes up with this example of Norman the reliable clairvoyant. So, who can tell me what a clairvoyant is? Yeah. It's like someone who can see the future or see what's happening somewhere else. Um, Now, of course, I don't believe that clairvoyance is a real thing. Uh, if you're curious why, you might want to check out some of my philosophy of the paranormal uh, lectures, which are on my YouTube channel. And that's a class I teach here every summer. Um, so I'm not a believer in clairvoyance, but let's state, for example, just for example's sake, that there's this fellow Norman who is a clairvoyant. He can see into the future. But he has no reason to believe he's clairvoyant, much less a reliable one. And he uses his abilities, and he comes to believe that the president is currently in New York City. Um, Now, Bonjour points out that Norman's belief is actually reliably justified. The belief is true. It's a result of a reliable belief forming process, namely his clairvoyance. There are no alternatives that would lead him to have a false belief. Uh, but here, Norman, who has a true belief, um, has it because or rather justifies it on this sort of hunch, right? Even if clairvoyance were real, um, what they're doing is not using reason, right? Um, so Norman's belief is not justified with good reasons. Uh, and this is unacceptable for Bonjour, right? Bonjour asks, why is not the mere fact that there is no way, as far as Norman knows or believes, for him to have obtained this information a sufficient reason for classifying this belief as an unfounded hunch and ceasing to accept it? And if Norman does not do this, is he not thereby being epistemically irrational and irresponsible? Bonjour thinks that Norman actually ought to reject his belief that the president is in New York City, even though the belief is true. He should reject it, Bonjour would say, because it was not the result of a rational belief forming process. It was reliable, but it wasn't rational. Let's see. Well, good question. I would probably have to consult the primary source on this. I guess, yeah, I'm not really sure what the difference would be. If he knew, would that be a rational process? Maybe you could make that argument, but I would still say no. Um, but again, like, don't lose sight of the fact that the point is just that Norman seems to be doing everything that the reliabilists want uh, in order for us to have true beliefs that are well justified. And yet, it seems, at least to certain folks, uh, that Norman uh, is being irrational. And our means of arriving at well justified true beliefs should be rational. Sean says, accepting the proposition that anyone is clairvoyant sort of presupposes that the future is preordained, which also erases free will and other assumptions we have. It seems like you would need an overwhelming burden of proof to accept yourself as a clairvoyant since it erases so much else. Why wouldn't a person just assume it was more likely they were mistaken? Yeah, that's a good point. And speaking of free will, we do have a whole chapter on that coming up, so that'll be fun. Yeah, justification, if like we're going to talk about this more once we get into the next chapter, but justification, Bonjour says, should require that we provide good reasons for our beliefs, and that's something that reliabilism doesn't seem to require, and that's kind of the point of Bonjour's little example here. Now, Alvin Goldman disagrees. He fires back by saying reliabilism requires only, in effect, that beliefs in the external world be suitably caused. If one wishes, one can simply employ the term justification that belief causation of this kind counts as justification. In this sense, of course, my theory does require justification, but this is an entirely different sort from the justification demanded by Cartesianism. So Goldman, when he uses the word justification, he means something like reliably caused, and Bonjour means something like having good reasons. Um, and it's funny because Goldman actually does agree with Bonjour that, yeah, Norman doesn't really know. Norman, the reliable clairvoyant, has a true belief, but he doesn't really know. Um, So on reliabilism, a reliably produced belief is justified unless there's some other reliable process that could undermine it. And in the case of Norman, it's that it's a hunch, right? Uh, there could be a better belief forming process that Norman could use. Norman could look at the newspaper, right? Newspaper stand. President visits New York City today. Oh, the president is in New York today. Um, Norman could pull out his phone and look at the news, right? Or look at his social media. Not to say that what we see on social media is um is always trustworthy, but you get the idea. Well, yeah, the only evidence he's using is his own intuition, and it's not even about external validation. It's that if justification means a reliable belief forming process or being reliably caused, um, then that's not enough for Bonjour, because Norman doesn't have good reasons. He's not being rational. His belief forming process is reliable, but it's not rational because he's going with his gut and not his mind. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay. Any other questions about anything we covered just now or last time? William, go ahead.
I just kind of had a question. Like, I don't know if this is pertinent, I guess, but like, what would be classified as good reason or like a good reason to justify something? You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
feel like it is mostly just like, okay, well, anything that conforms to like, physics, the laws of physics or something like that. But like, can you really know?
Right. Welcome to epistemology. Yeah, that's a really good question. Different philosophers will give you different answers for this, but when I say like if I want to claim that I have good reasons for holding a belief that I do, those reasons themselves have to be rational, which I take to mean I'm following the rules of proper reasoning. Um, which are the things that like logicians study, right? Logic is the science of proper reasoning. There actually are ways of reasoning, forms of inference like we looked at before. There's forms of we've got like deductive inference, we've got enumerative induction, we've got abduction. um, these forms of inference are rational because they follow the rules of proper reasoning. You could also expand that to include other sorts of principles or rules of thumb. Occam's razor, for example, like the principle of parsimony. Um, don't believe everything you see on TV might be a reasonable heuristic to hold, right? So, however you're thinking about things, you need to be doing it properly, and there is a proper way to reason. There are ways of reasoning where we know we will arrive at the truth, like deductive reasoning is truth preserving. Certain forms of inductive reasoning have led to enormous success in the sciences, so we know that they work. Um, and just it's the sort of everyday epistemologist who has to remember not to believe everything they see on the television or on social media, right? All of these, in some sense or another, count as reasonable or rational. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, like it's pretty complex, but it's yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. And I understand how it can seem a little circular too when we're talking about this, because it's like, well, to be justified, a belief has to be formed on the basis of these processes, or it has to have such and such a connection to the world, and that's how we know it's reasonable. But what is it to? Okay, but you know. what is reason in general, right? What is it to be rational beyond these specific sort of examples we're looking at? Um, but we'll stick with it and we'll get a picture of it. So a couple questions in the chat. Galen says, so Bonjour kind of said, I'm right because I made up a scenario that it feels like you would believe. Uh, well, the guy, yeah, Galen, that's sorry, your comment is funny. No, it's a good comment, but it's amusing to me because yeah, it's like yeah, he's wrong. Yes, yes, I agree with you that I'm wrong. No, Goldman agrees that Norman doesn't know. I think that Goldman just does not have those sorts of processes in mind. Like he wants, if there are reliable belief forming methods, that means there's a reliable chain of causation in those methods, right? Kind of like me using my senses to look at the coffee cup and form the perceptual belief that there's a coffee cup. That's a causal chain, right? Light reflects off of the surface of the coffee cup. Some of it enters my eyes and goes to my retina, stimulates photoreceptors, goes to my occipital lobe and eventually my temporal lobe, where I form a mental representation of the coffee cup, right? That's a reliable belief forming process, and there's also a sort of causal chain that we can point to that constitutes a lot of that process, right? Um, that's the kind of thing Goldman seems to have in mind, and I think that's why he says, "Oh yeah, Lawrence, or Norman, the reliable clairvoyant. Oh yeah, he totally doesn't know because his beliefs aren't reliably caused. He just has a hunch, right? Um, so I hope that answer makes sense. Um, is there anything on the quiz that is from the textbook and not talked about in the lecture? Um, well, there could be. Um, but if you've been paying attention to the lectures, you're probably good. Remember, study before you begin the quiz. I know the quiz is open book, but you should
Right.
still study before you begin. A reliable belief forming process requires a causal chain. Yeah, Yusuf, for Goldman. Yes. And for others too. But we don't always remember, I don't know, this could be a little weird. Like, I mean, for some people, deductive arguments are reliable belief forming processes, and I guess they're kind of causal, but not in the same way that more empirical sorts of belief forming processes are, like looking with your senses and seeing what's out there. That involves like physical causation, but a deductive argument is more like, yeah, I guess you could say it's causal in that if the premises are true and the argument valid, that should cause you to believe the conclusion. So let's leave some wiggle room. But yeah, for Goldman, he wants our beliefs to be our true beliefs must be reliably caused, and that is justification for Goldman. Yeah, Sean, good point. Bonjour, if I'm not mistaken, is a foundationalist, and we're going to talk about that right now. So I won't say any more right now because that's one of the topics we're going to talk to today. Yeah, yeah, Samir, exactly.
Man.
That's where we're going to now. So let's get at it. So we've
Yeah.
been so whose microphone is on?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So we've been talking quite a lot about justification, right? Whatever we probably all of us here, we've seen in the last little bit of discussion that philosophers um, disagree from time to time about what amounts to justification. But I think all of us here would agree that our beliefs ought to be justified if we're going to say they count as knowledge. Um, this could be evidence, reasons, reliable causal chains. Um, but whatever we think, Whatever it is we think justifies our beliefs, we should be able to answer why we hold the beliefs that we do. And that's what a theory of justification would get us. A theory of justification would spell out what it means for a belief to be justified. It would give us the necessary and sufficient conditions for a justified belief, right? I mean, do we agree? Our beliefs ought to be justified. We probably let's bracket the question of what amounts to the right kind of justification, but we want our beliefs to be justified, correct? And not just a specific sort of belief, all kinds of beliefs. So how many of you have beliefs about the natural world, what we might call like scientific sort of beliefs? I just need a random one, a random belief about the natural world. Yeah, the sky is blue. Yeah. A tree falling does make a sound. Yeah. What are your reasons for believing these things? So, Jaden, why do you believe the sky is blue? Devlin, why do you believe that when a tree falls and no one's around to hear it, I assume, it still makes a sound? What are your reasons for that? Because of what you've seen before. Okay. Oh, but you were there when the tree fell. What if you weren't there? Would it still make a sound? Yeah, the senses. In both cases, it's the senses. Yeah, that's right, Sean. A bit nitpicky. If we wanted to be a little more specific, we could say that we perceive the sky as blue, and that's because um, the gases in our atmosphere scatter blue light, right? Uh, of course, when the sun gets close to the horizon, the blue light that's scattered all over the place remains scattered, but the red rays can keep coming through. So that's why sunsets look different. Um, but in any case, right? Whether it's trees falling or the color of the sky, you have good reasons for the beliefs that you're holding sensory experience, right? What about non-natural beliefs? Some of you might practice a certain religion, right? And even though certain religions emphasize, the notion of faith, right? Belief in the absence of evidence. I actually still think, not being, a non-religious person myself, it does still seem to me that people who hold religious beliefs want to have good reasons for holding them. Do you know what I mean? So even though it's all about faith, they still seek out good reasons for having their beliefs. Jacob, can you expand on that a bit? What you mean by morals?
I meant that like some people just like believe in like their religion, like not for like the fact that they believe in the God, but they want to follow like all the morals that are like, for example, in the Bible, it says to be a good person.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's more
So,
about that aspect.
well, that's a good point. I think that that's more to do with ethics than epistemology, but that is a good point. I mean, for example, like why would you believe the claims of a certain religious text or a religious authority figure? Um, I think presumably the people who do believe such claims believe that they have good reasons for believing them, right? Um, well, Sean, I don't know. I actually do think we have free will, just not the sort of free will that you might think we have. Uh, but we should probably leave that for the chapter on free will. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Yeah. Yeah, some people have like these well, I guess they're called religious experiences, right? Like Cat Stevens. Anybody know who Cat Stevens is? He's also known as Yusuf Islam. Anybody familiar? Yeah. Oh, Yusuf knows. Yeah, so Cat Stevens was a musician. Yeah, the songwriter, exactly. And he was swimming in the ocean one day and he was pulled under by I guess I don't know, like a riptide or a big wave or something, and he thought he was going to drown, right? So he kind of says like, "Hey, God, if you save me, I'll work for you." And then he didn't die. And he took that as like an act of God, right? Um, and then eventually he spends months researching all of the different religions. And eventually he decided to convert to Islam. He changed his name. He stopped playing music for a lot of years. Got himself into a bit of trouble in the 80s with some controversial statements he made about Salman Rushdie, the author. But to his credit, he's also done a lot of good work for charity. And now that he's returned to playing music, he kind of continues that. But for Cat Stevens slash Yusuf Islam, that experience and the subsequent research he did might have been to him like good reasons for holding the beliefs that he does. So this is a bit of a rant, but that's just to think. It's just to drive the point home that I think even people who emphasize belief without evidence still seek evidence for the beliefs that they hold, right? Even if I don't agree that with their beliefs or with uh, with uh, with the idea that the evidence they have is good evidence, right? That's because I'm an atheist, but I'm not like a Richard Dawkins kind of atheist. So don't worry, don't worry about that. Yeah, it could be, and that's probably a lot of people would say that. But my point is, to him, those are good reasons for holding the beliefs that he does. So whether you're talking about natural or non-natural beliefs, I think we all seek out good reasons. We all want our beliefs to be justified. Um, yeah, and Galen, that's a good point. And our last chapter is on questions like these. The last chapter is all about whether God exists, and if so, what is God like? So, kind of like the ultimate metaphysical problem, right? So that's going to be fun when we finally get to that. But before that, we got to power through these slides. I'm sorry for the rant, everybody, but yeah. Okay, where were we? Um, what are the motivations behind the desire to have a theory of justification? Like a proper theory, a philosophical theory. Um, Well, the first reason is that we want to know whether our beliefs are epistemically credible, right? Uh, and further, whether our reasons for holding the beliefs are credible, right? I might tell you, and this is actually pretty funny since I left this in from last year, but it seems to eternally recur. If I believe there is a skunk living under my porch, for example, you might want to know why I believe that. And I could give you reasons. I smelled the skunk. I've seen it going in and out from underneath my porch. Incidentally, last night, I was chilling out on the couch with the windows open, and all I could smell was skunk. Uh, they 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 inhabit the neighborhood I live in, and I often see them at night wandering down the sidewalk. Um, and further, this is actually true. A couple maybe last week or the week before that, um, the stairs from the front porch of my building had actually been removed, as if someone was trying to retrieve an animal that was living under there that shouldn't have been living under there. So I could tell you all of this, like, well, it looks like their animal control was there. I've been smelling the skunk. I've been seeing the skunks. These are my reasons why I believe there's a skunk. Um, living under my porch, right? Uh, oh, that's a question. Okay, that's a question. So just for the person who sent me that direct message, I would send me an email about that. Okay, Yusuf, you're an empiricist. Nice. Yeah, everything, well, in this example, everything leads back to the senses, but um, what about how any of our beliefs come to have any credibility at all in the first place? Are there some foundational beliefs that are not justified by other beliefs, and then the rest of my beliefs are built on top of those, like a little house of beliefs? So all of these questions are, kind of illustrate like why, one reason why we want a theory of justification. We want to know more about the epistemic credibility of our beliefs. We want to know if we are rationally entitled to hold the beliefs that we do. And a theory of justification would allow us to know that. A second set of reasons. We want to know the aim of our justified belief. Why is holding a justified true belief better than having a true but unjustified belief? And this gets us back to Plato, right? When we talked about the example from the Meno with the images of Daedalus. Why is a true belief better? Why is a justified true belief, i.e., knowledge, better than mere opinion? Well, Socrates said that, well, true beliefs are great while they abide, but like the images of Daedalus, they can get up and wander away out of the mind. But knowledge is a true belief that's secured by a chain of the cause, the tie of the cause, I think is the language that Plato uses in that dialogue. That's why it's better. Um, and I think, overall, our discussion has tended to show that if our beliefs are well justified, they're more likely to be true. And if we're all rational individuals, we want our beliefs to be true, right? I think we all want that. So we should all be interested in an in justification and a theory thereof because it can tell us whether our beliefs are likely to be true, which is something that we're interested in having true beliefs. Now, often we justify our beliefs by giving reasons, and those reasons often include other beliefs, right? Um, and there's any number of different kinds of beliefs that could be used to justify a given belief. So there's perceptual beliefs, like we discussed earlier, like I perceive the coffee cup on the picnic table here, and so I form the belief that there is a coffee cup on the table. I can smell the coffee, and so I'm justified in believing that the coffee cup contains coffee and not something else, like tea. So we form beliefs on the basis of things that we see and hear and smell and touch and taste. But we also have other kinds of beliefs, like what we could call background beliefs. So these might be beliefs that we acquire over our lives about different aspects of the world, right? So over there, if I look across the way here, I can see a little groundhog snooping around in the grass. So that's a perceptual belief that there's a groundhog there. But then I have my background belief that groundhogs are mammals, right? I'm not looking over there and saying, oh, look, it's a reptile. No, it's a type of mammal. That's a background belief, right? My belief that groundhogs are herbivores is is a background belief. A belief that they are not just mammals but also rodents and are therefore related to beavers and rats and so forth, and squirrels. Those are background beliefs. Matter of fact, my partner and I, whenever we see a groundhog, we actually call them land beavers or beavers of the land because it's I don't know, sounds cooler than groundhog to me. So there are also beliefs that we form on the basis of testimony. What you learn from experts, what you see on the news, um, so on and so forth, right? In fact, a lot of our beliefs are acquired via testimony. A heck of a lot of our beliefs are acquired via testimony. So, which sources provide us with reliable evidence? What are the sources that will allow us to come to true beliefs that will that are justified and that can allow us to justify other beliefs. And there's two broad sort of approaches here. Um, One is foundationalism, and the other is coherence theory, or as I'm going to call it, coherentism. Now, on foundationalism, all our beliefs are justified by certain foundational beliefs, which don't need justification from other beliefs. And on coherence theory, our beliefs are all sort of connected up together in a big system, like a spider's web. And they mutually support one another. And there's no single foundational belief or set of foundational beliefs. Now, for today, we're going to focus primarily on foundationalism. Hmm. uh, yeah. This Zane, this might be a Discord question. Just because it is, I'm already behind. Today it's my fault I'm behind, actually, because I went on a bunch of tangents. But let's save that for discussion. Yeah, well, I'll be happy to talk about it there this evening. Um, so start with foundationalism. We've already met a very famous foundationalist, right? And that is Descartes. And we get a sense of his foundationalism here, right? He starts the meditations by writing. It is now some years since I detected how many were the false beliefs that I had from my earliest youth admitted as true, and how doubtful was everything I had since constructed on this basis. And from that time I was convinced that I must once and for all seriously undertake to rid myself of all opinions which I had formerly accepted, and commence to build anew from the foundation, if I wanted to establish any firm and permanent structure in the sciences. And we've already learned what Descartes' foundational belief was: the cogito, right? He formulates the skeptical arguments, the dream argument and the demon argument, in order to demolish all of his beliefs, uh, unless he finds like one belief that is infallible, and that is that I think, therefore I am. I am, I exist, right? The cogito. So, even if following the dream argument, his senses don't represent the world the way it is, or the demon argument, there's this supremely powerful, malevolent, evil genius who can deceive him about even a priori knowledge. He's still certain that as long as he thinks, he exists. And that's his foundational belief, right? So we've already met a foundationalist. But there are a couple of different versions of foundationalism: strong foundationalism and modest foundationalism. And each is concerned with something called the regress argument. So let's take a look at the regress argument now. So the idea is, as we saw earlier, that we justify beliefs by appealing to other beliefs, right? If, for example, I believe that my cat is on the couch, I mean, I'm not at home on my couch right now, but at some point in the past when I was teaching this class, I was, and the cat was there. So if I believe the cat is on my couch, how do I justify that belief? Well, I might appeal to perceptual beliefs, like I can see the cat, or background beliefs. I know what cats look like. I believe that I have a cat. Um, and these beliefs, though, that justify the first belief, they require justification. Maybe I justify my belief that I see the cat on the couch with a further belief, like I can trust what I can see. My eyes are working properly, right? I'm wearing my glasses, so I can be sure that it is a cat and not just a pile of laundry or something like that, right? Um, I know what cats look like. I believe that I haven't been lied to my entire life about cats. Nobody's engaged in some kind of conspiracy to make me think that that's a cat when actually it's a dog. Um, But you can see like there's a worry of an infinite regress here, right? If we justify beliefs by appealing to other beliefs, and we justify those beliefs by appealing to other beliefs, where does it end, right? Does it go on forever? Is it beliefs all the way down? Or do we eventually hit a foundation of some kind, where the beliefs are not justified by other beliefs, but are maybe like self-justified in some way? So the worry is the worry of a regress, an unending process. We face a couple of options here when dealing with this worry. One option is the regress never ends. It is beliefs all the way down. That wouldn't be good. What about option two? The regress ends with some unjustified belief. Well, that's not acceptable, because then we would lose the justification for all the other beliefs in the chain. The circular option, option three, maybe it's beliefs not all the way down, but all the way around until we get, we have a belief that depends on another, that depends on another, that depends on another, until we eventually get back to the original belief. That wouldn't work too. So finally, we have option four. We arrive at some set of basic belief or a basic belief which don't require justification from other beliefs. That's what foundationalism says. Eventually, either on the strong version or the modest version, we will run into a basic belief or some set of basic beliefs that will save us from the regress. Why why are we worried about regresses? Well, an infinite regress as an option one um, is usually a sign that we've got something wrong, right? We can't if there is an infinite regress, that means there's no end to it. We'd be forever seeking that foundational self-justified belief that justifies all the other stuff. So we would, if the regress were there, we would never really be able to know whether our beliefs are appropriately justified or not. Likewise with option two, that's not acceptable for us because if we end up with a foundation of unjustified beliefs, then yeah, all our other beliefs are then their justification can be called into question. And the circular option isn't good because it's circular, right? Whenever we have an infinite regress or circularity in our arguments, that's a sign that we're in trouble and we need to rethink things. So we're going to go with option four. We're going to see if the regress terminates. Some common features of all of the different foundationalist theories are that they're committed to the existence of basic beliefs, which you can think of as epistemically independent beliefs. So they don't depend on other beliefs for their justification. Now, what is a basic belief? Uh, could be any number of different kinds of beliefs. Could be a perceptual belief, right? I form the belief that the cat is on the couch because I see my cat on the couch, right? Now, again, not everyone's going to agree with this. Some foundationalists are going to say that perceptual beliefs cannot be basic beliefs. Descartes would say that. He would say, you're going to count perceptual beliefs as basic beliefs? Okay, buddy. I mean, he wouldn't have said it in those exact words, but yeah, Jaden, exactly. Yeah, the cogito is a basic belief. Um, well, some would say yes, Sean, but not everybody. I think the rationalist epistemologists would say yes, your basic beliefs should be a priori, but more empiricist thinkers would disagree with that. They might countenance the suggestion that perceptual beliefs can be basic beliefs, right? So it really depends on your inclinations. Are you a rationalist or are you an empiricist, right? So in my example of the cat on the couch, if I believe that on the basis of my seeing the cat, and I say that that's a basic belief, my perceptual belief is a basic belief, that's certainly a very empiricist way of going about this, right? But somebody like Descartes would disagree. So basic beliefs are sources of justification, but they're justified without appealing to other beliefs. At least that's the claim. And some would argue that perceptual beliefs count, a priori beliefs count, memories could count, beliefs about your own mental states could count as basic beliefs, right? Another thing that's common between different foundationalist theories is that there's this sort of inferential or justifying connection between non-basic beliefs and basic beliefs. So you can trace back, as I say here in the second point, you can trace back a justified non-basic belief to a basic belief or a set of basic beliefs. And Descartes emphasized this, right? There's a deductive connection between basic and non-basic beliefs, such that you can kind of work backwards from your non-basic beliefs to your basic beliefs through these deductive connections. So remember, deductive inference is truth preserving. So that means if your premises are true and the form of the argument is valid, you're going to reach a true conclusion. And so your conclusion, your non-basic belief, can be traced back to the basic beliefs in the premises. That's the idea, right? But a lot of philosophers today aren't as strictly rational or rationalist as Descartes was. A lot of people today would probably agree that inductive connections between basic and non-basic beliefs are also good. So they don't have to be deductive connections. It could also be inductive connections, enumerative induction, abduction, right? Here is how or one of the ways we can distinguish strong foundation and modest foundationalism. Strong foundationalism would say you need to have those deductive connections between basic and non-basic beliefs. Modest foundationalism would say inductive connections are fine. Modest foundationalism also adopts fallibilism. So strong foundationalism does not. And fallibilists say that there could be further evidence out there that might override a belief that you hold now, might override your previous justification. So we discussed this a little bit last time, right? We were talking about defeaters, misleading defeaters. So modest foundationalism says that you can still say that you know something even if it's possible that further evidence could overturn that belief. Strong foundationalists would say no. Um, we don't allow for fallibilism. To say you know something means that you cannot be wrong in holding that belief. Your beliefs have to be infallible. Again, this is something we see in Descartes, right? So strong foundationalism, for these reasons, is also sometimes called Cartesian foundationalism, or infallible foundationalism, right? Because it doesn't countenance fallibilism. So our basic beliefs cannot be mistaken beliefs. Justification is only transmitted through our inductive inferences, not deductive inferences, not inductive inferences. And those beliefs about which we could possibly be mistaken, um, they don't meet the epistemic standards of a strong foundationalist. Neither do beliefs held on the basis of justification that involves inductive inference. Um, what do you mean if it temporarily true? Like like the proposition that it's cloudy right now? I mean, it's true right now that it's cloudy, but it might not be true tomorrow. In that case, remember that the truth of the proposition depends on the way the world is. Does that make sense? Is that what you're asking about, Yusuf? Well, um, just to move on, for strong foundationalists, a basic belief could include things like introspective beliefs, so beliefs about your own mental states. And Crumley uses a really interesting example here, which I'm not sure if it's inspired by the example that I'm going to use at the end of the slides, but maybe. You could be mistaken about the color of a particular dress, but you can't be mistaken about how the color seemed to you. So these introspective beliefs are like self-presenting or self-evident. But this is a little strong, and it might be a little bit controversial. And that's why a lot of people nowadays endorse some version or another of modest foundationalism. Yes, as long as you can adopt a new belief when appropriate. Like it's that picture, Galen. Yeah. Um, so if I believe that it is cloudy right now, and it is cloudy, then my belief is true. But then if the sun comes up, I have to change my belief, right? Otherwise, I'll be wrong. Well, let's not do the dress yet. We're getting there. Let's not do it yet, or we'll never finish. Okay, so modest foundationalism says that basic beliefs can be considered justified, even if there's some evidence out there that might undermine your justification for holding that belief. So basic beliefs only have to be fallibly justified, not infallibly justified, right? As I say here in the second point, the possibility that we can be mistaken about our basic beliefs doesn't mean they cannot serve as basic beliefs. And justification can be transmitted not only deductively, but inductively, as I mentioned earlier. So if you're a modest foundationalist, what kind of beliefs can serve as basic beliefs? Well, perceptual beliefs, um, memory beliefs, beliefs arrived at via a priori reasoning, but also even a posteriori reasoning can all serve as basic beliefs. And Audi even says that some non-belief impressions can serve as the bases for basic beliefs. So basic beliefs might be non-doxastic. Basic beliefs are dependent on things which are not actually themselves beliefs, and that's where they get their justification from. So remember, like, and this is a sort of good place to emphasize this point. Um, on different versions of foundationalism, it's not that our basic beliefs are not justified; they are, but not by other beliefs. They might be self-justified. They might be justified by other non-doxastic states. It's just that basic beliefs are not justified by other beliefs. That's what makes them basic. So a perceptual belief, like again, the coffee cup being on the table, could count as a basic belief, but the perception of the coffee cup itself, that's what justifies my belief. That's not a belief in itself. That's a perception. So my perceptual belief that there's a coffee cup on the table is justified by my non-doxastic sensation, which is my perception of the coffee cup. That's what underwrites my perceptual belief in the coffee cup. Yes. Yeah. Good question, Caleb. And Levon, if I'm getting your names right, I hope I am. Yeah, you answered it. That's correct. Now, there's a bit of a criticism to worry about here. All of these non-doxastic states, like experiences, impressions, sensations, etc., they might justify basic beliefs, but as we just said, they're not beliefs themselves. And since they're not beliefs themselves, the worry is that they don't require justification. Yet, if they play an epistemic role, namely justifying basic beliefs, don't we also need to ensure that these non-doxastic states are epistemically credible? I mean, ought we require justification of them? Like sensations, they will only provide you with epistemic support for your beliefs if they are reliable sources of information. So, where do our sensations get their epistemic credibility from? On one hand, this might reveal another regress, right? And that's what we're trying to avoid in the first place, right? Beliefs justified by other beliefs, by other beliefs, by other beliefs. We've got to stop at some foundation somewhere, or we've got a regress or a or a circle. So we might end up in another regress, looking for epistemic credibility for our non-doxastic states, our non-belief states. But on the other hand, if our sensations, impressions, experiences, etc., are not epistemically credible, they can't serve as justification for our basic beliefs. Now, a lot of foundationalists will say, hey, what do you want? What do you want, man? This is just part of the nature of coming to have beliefs. Sensory information produces sensations, and sensations lead to basic beliefs, and it's by virtue of all these interactions that our beliefs turn out to be true. Usually, that is. And now we come to the dress, which I suppose I could have saved for the unit on perception. But consider this phenomenon. This is the dress itself, and the dress also refers to the phenomenon that kind of took Twitter by storm in 2015, right? Back when it was still called Twitter. Um, yeah, I know, so long ago. So the dress is actually black and blue. What color do you perceive? Everybody in the chat, go. What color is the dress? A lot of people answering. Nice. Gold and white, gold and white, black and blue. Forever be black and blue, gold and white, black and blue. Crazy, right? Quite a good variation here. Oh, so Hyla saw both. I have only ever seen it as white and gold. I can't seem to get it to change. Um, White and gold, yeah. Isn't that weird? So weird. Yeah. Oh, it keeps changing. Interesting. Where is the white? So when I see it, see where my mouse cursor is? This is gold and this is white. This is gold, white, gold. Sleeves are white. Yeah, I can squint a bit and yeah, no, it's white and gold. Um, so yeah, fun, huh? It might. There's probably a lot of different factors, individual physiology and also the conditions under which you're viewing the dress. So let me explain the story here. This was I think a wedding dress or a bridesmaid's dress, and I think the mother of the bride or the maid of honor or somebody went to pick it up, took a picture, and said, "This is your dress. What do you think?" And the person receiving the image went like, "Oh, they've completely screwed the color up. It's white and gold." And the person who sent the image was, "What are you talking about? It's black and blue. I'm right here looking at it in real life." Um, so a picture was posted to Twitter like, "Hey, internet, what color is the dress?" And pretty much 50-50, people were either like black and blue or white and gold, right? And this sparked a whole big viral conversation about how color perception actually works, which was really interesting. Um, I think this is cool because You could be mistaken about the color of the dress, right? Like the color of the dress really is black and blue. If you go and like look at this dress in real life, it is black and blue. But here my senses are misleading me. I see it as white and gold, even though it's not white and gold in real life. Yeah. The good everybody's kind of getting their minds blown in the chat. I like that. Yeah, it could be the lighting conditions, it could be the screen you're looking at it on and the color settings. It could be differences in individual physiology. It's probably a combination of a lot of these different things. No, no. If I went and looked at it in person, I would see black and blue. But the picture was perceived differently by other people. Now, here's another thing. Yes, exactly, Moreo. It's just like Laurel and Yanny, which I will say share on the Discord server, or someone else can share on the Discord server because I don't want to run out of time. We're almost done. Um, I can be mistaken about the real color of the dress. An interesting point that we can make about introspective beliefs is that I cannot be mistaken about how the dress seems to me, right? I'm mistaken that the dress is white and gold. It's not really white and gold. I cannot be mistaken about the fact that the dress seems white and gold to me. That's an interesting feature of introspective beliefs. Um, but our sensations can lead us to make false, to form false beliefs, right? That's really what I'm doing here. If we go back a slide, remember, this is just part of the nature of coming to have beliefs. Sensory interactions produce sensations, which lead to basic beliefs, and our beliefs usually turn out to be true. Well, not always, and if you're in on team white and gold, your senses have led you astray. I'm sorry to say. Yeah, there's a lot of different stuff that can explain this. Color theory specifically is about how colors are related to each other and to the various wavelengths of light. But yeah, some of you, the fact it's not all the way it's presented. Some of you will try and mess with your screen settings ad infinitum, and you will still see it the same way. That's what happens to me. I just cannot seem to perceive it as blue and black. I would have to go see the dress in real life. And that is probably due to your brain. So part of it is environmental, part of it is neurological. So we can have true beliefs about how things are perceived by us, but we cannot use, well, not always. Usually we can, Yusuf, but not always, right? But maybe trying to identify basic beliefs is the wrong way to go about things, right? And that's what the alternative says. The alternative to foundationalism, which is coherence theory or coherentism, says that justification is a matter of the relations between our beliefs, not a matter of building upon basic, sort of self-justified beliefs or basic beliefs that are justified by mental states other than belief. And so that's what we'll focus on next time. We're going to look at coherence theory, evidentialism, and also we're going to talk about the case for believing in propositions in the absence of evidence. We're going to talk about that in terms of like what it means epistemologically and ethically. Oh, weird. It switches. Well, yeah, but I don't know. Maybe Galen, maybe the images on my phone are the shadows on the wall of Plato's cave, right? So we do have a couple of extra minutes. So I want to put this question to you, because we've been talking a lot about epistemology, which means theory of knowledge or study of knowledge. Um, but I have a feeling, just see what's in the chat. Yeah, yeah, the stick. Yeah, that was used. That's been used by philosophers as well. I think John Locke, um, perhaps maybe was that Locke. I don't remember who, but yeah, the stick in the water. Our senses can mislead us. Our senses don't represent the world the way it really is. Yes. Um, we will talk more about Locke later, but for now, um, we have been learning about um, epistemology. Again, means theory of knowledge or study of knowledge. What is knowledge? How do we know when we have it? What differentiates knowledge from mere belief? What's how do we know when our true beliefs are justified, et cetera, et cetera? This is a sort of class where I think students end up with more questions than answers, right? This is the sort of class where you go into it thinking you're going to learn something, and then you come out having learned something, but also, more importantly, realizing just how much you still don't know. And I'm wondering if any of you are feeling that yet. Okay, good. That means I'm doing something right. Now one thing I want to impress upon you, that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. That's the difference, in my view and in a lot of others, between knowledge and wisdom. Every lecture more clueless than when it started. Yeah. Now that's okay. You are learning things. You are learning things. And I'm sure that on the test, you're going to really demonstrate what you've learned. I think you're all, at least the people that are here participating and the people that are watching the YouTube recordings and you're doing your readings, you're probably going to do pretty well. You are learning things. But I just wanted to tell you, like, if you're also feeling like more confused the more we learn, that is fine. That's okay. How many people? I think we've got like a little over 300. I'd say a bit of both. I'd say the test is a bit of both. I mean, it sticks pretty close to what to like the stuff I talk about in lectures. It sticks pretty close to that. But you want to make sure you've read the readings, that you've been taking notes. Study before you begin. I like to make a master study sheet and then study that. Just make sure you don't copy and paste anything from your notes. Don't use search. Don't use generative AI, right? But I think you're all going to be doing pretty good. And I think you're all gaining in knowledge, even though it doesn't feel like that every time. Okay. So great work. Good luck on the test. Remember, you have until Friday at 11:59 p.m. to complete it. Once you begin, there is a time limit. That's all for today. I will see you next time. No, you don't need to worry about citing the textbook in the test, but on your essay, yes. What if we write some stuff we haven't learned in class? Yeah, like I am asking some of the questions ask you to come up with examples. That's okay, but the test it very clearly asks about specific things we've covered, and it also in the questions it tells you what you will get marks for. So don't go off on a big tangent about something we haven't covered, right? Read each question slowly a couple of times before you start answering it to make sure that you really know what the question is asking. Okay, my laptop is dying. Galen, that's a Discord question. Um, yeah, that's a Discord question. I'll have to answer that later because my laptop is about to die. But I'll see you all on Thursday, okay? All right. Have a good day, everybody.